Absolutely. I am standing before you as a man who turned off the West Virginia-Houston game to watch shows with his wife.
Oh.
And then, started like following along. Okay, well, this one's over. And then missed the end, but went back and saw it.
That's fair.
Garrett, just go ahead, but I'm going to tell you, here was my reaction.
No, that was, I got to be honest, I was going back and forth myself on that game. It was the opening night for the Stars, so I was fully dialed in on hockey. But once I got on, I was on Twitter, and I saw the score, and I jumped over and started flipping back and forth. That fourth quarter was completely insane. For you to have 4 lead changes there, the way Houston was able to win, the penalty really cost West Virginia. And that's one where we see that kind of situation unfold a lot throughout college football, and it doesn't impact 95% of the games. That's the 1% where every coach can go and draw up and dial to and say, this is exactly why we can't have these costly penalties. Yeah. It was brutal. I think that Donovan Smith, to me, played arguably his best game of the year. I think if you look at the stat line, threw for 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. I was wondering, is that a situation where maybe Dana's looking at Garrett Green's struggles through the air and be like, yo, Donovan, you've got to be the better passing quarterback in this situation, man, or you might need to hit the portal or something because we can't afford you costing us on this one.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that was so – and look, it was tipped up in the air. It was exactly like when you see it just watching as every Hail Mary that's almost ever worked.
Right.
Aside from the first one, the Drew Pearson one.
The original.
The original, which Minnesota wasn't ready for because it didn't exist. Other than that one, it's like a tip ball and, it goes around. I mean, so I don't like – I say that, and there was a Hail Mary at the end of the Georgia Tech game last week, and it just smoothly hit the receiver in stride.
Right.
Doug Flutie to Phelan wasn't tipped. I mean, it was just jumped up and got it in the end zone. So, but that was an absolutely crazy finish last night. Doesn't change my mind about Neil Brown not being taken off the hot seat because weird endings happen, but he's going to be kicking himself for how that one ended for a while because to come all the way back and score with 12 seconds. And then Houston should have never even had a shot at that. They should have never even had a shot at a 50-yard, it was a 49. So they're on the other, within 12 seconds, they're on the other side of the 50. You can't let that happen. You just cannot let that happen.
No, you can't. But I think Houston ultimately did a good job of coming in and identify. I think their game plan they drew up was pretty impressive. Saying, look, we're not going to let C.J. Donaldson beat us. They held him under 100 yards rushing on the ground. They forced Garrett Green to beat him, or really to use his feet ultimately because he wasn't getting much going through the air. And really a lot of his throws, man, he has no velocity whatsoever. And so it's just a lot of questionable pass choices, I would say, that he made. You can definitely tell he's a lot better on the ground. But, no, I think overall, man, Houston did an excellent job of eliminating C.J. Donaldson. I think that kind of caught West Virginia off guard a little bit. And you kind of – I know this game in general comes as a shock to most people. But I remember prior to the year when the schedules came out, Jack and I were doing our preseason projections for every team. And I remember telling him, you really think Dana's going to lose to West Virginia? And then, but as the season progressed and the way West Virginia was playing and Houston struggling, there was no way in hell Houston was supposed to win that game. So I just, to me, was that one where you think that ultimately saved Hogo's job?
I don't think so because I don't think he was really in danger. I think we've talked to Chris Pesman a lot, on the show, and he doesn't want to fire Dana Holgorsen. No. Most ADs don't want to contrary to what you think, the AD is not sitting around and going, gosh, I hope my coach Mel Tucker's his way out of this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I don't think that's the case. I think they want Dana Holgorsen to succeed. I do think that Chris Pesman is a reasonable person.
No, absolutely.
And I do think that there are there need to be reasonable expectations on all 4 teams in the first year in the Big 12. Like, you cannot. You can get some new recruits over the last couple of years saying, like, hey, you're going to be able to play in the Big 12. You're going to be able to play in the Big 12. But that doesn't mean that your whole roster is ready for that week in and week out. Just like, look, Oklahoma and Texas look like they're set up to move to the SEC, but we'll also see like when they play Georgia for the first time, and then have to turn around and play Alabama in 2 weeks and LSU 2 weeks after that. Like, we'll see if their roster, and you may be talking about a 9-3 year, but it might be a 9-3 year that would have been 11-1 year in a different conference that's not quite as deep at that moment, right?
Right.
So, yeah, there's growing pains for the new 4. There will probably be less growing pains for the Pac-4 because they're in a league that's similar.
Well, they're already
and they're already in a good league, right? I mean, this year's only 2 of the 4 teams are experiencing the good right now. The other 2 are kind of varying degrees, although Arizona looks like they're getting better.
Yeah.
And Arizona State, I do think, is going to be good in the league. But yeah, there's going to be that. So like that, I think you have to have that expectation of, yeah, they were going to get rated a little bit. Not having Ultimate Caskell, even though it's just one guy, is really huge because when you have a Donovan Smith who has one weakness, honestly, he has one weakness. It is he turns the ball over a lot. And it's a terrible weakness. It's the worst weakness a quarterback can have.
Yeah.
You'd rather him have less of an arm and turn the ball over less than have the rocket that's attached to his shoulder and turn it over as much as he does. But if you have an Ultimate Caskell back there, you can take a lot of pressure off him because that's a guy who's good everywhere he's going to go, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you have to have some reasonable expectations. Now, based on last year and then this year and the up and down nature, I think there's going to come a crossroads for Dana Holgorsen at Houston. I just don't think it's going to be this year because what are you doing if you're Houston? I think you need to navigate through not only the 12-team Big 12 this year, the 14-team Big 12 this year, but the 16-team Big 12 next year and see where you really are measuring up before making of it like our coach is deficient compared to this, in my opinion. And look, they're 3-3 right now. They would be 2-4. Like, I think you know that Dana Holgorsen will find their way through this.
I also think it says something having a coach in place who understands the hardship of bringing in a program and making that transition to the Big 12 like he did at West Virginia. I think obviously West Virginia was in a better position when they came into the Big 12 than what Houston was. But at the same time, I think having somebody who knows how to navigate that, who has been able to kind of balance out the ebbs and flows that goes with that transition helps, and that probably helps give Dana a pass too. But I also think you're going to see what can they do in the transfer portal after having a year under their belt. Now that they've got a full display of film showing this is where we're deficient in all these areas and the adjustments we need to make, how many Houston kids are they going to be able to grab in the transfer portal heading into next season, or recruits like you got a Matthew Golden? Like, Matthew Golden is an elite prospect that could play anywhere in the nation, but you were able to get him and hold him tight. I think finding that balance and being able to do that, I'm really interested to see how they build off this season. But as far as like Dana goes, I think it's good to bring up the point that while the struggles are there, they're there for a reason, and he actually knows how to navigate that. Whereas if you hire a new coach off the streets, or not necessarily off the streets, but say you grab like a Jeff Traylor per se, because he's always going to be in the mix, right?
Yeah.
He hasn't navigated that before. Like there's obstacles.
He's
there.
Navigating it right now in his own league.
Exactly.
He's in a new league himself. So yeah, and that team, I think people thought they would be better than they were year one. Now, granted, Frank Harris has fought through injuries all year, so they're not exactly who they thought they were going to be. And they're one of the teams that lost to Houston, as a matter of fact. But I think that if you're Dana Holgorsen, if you're Chris Pesman looking at Dana Holgorsen going into next year, let's see where you are with the 16-team Big 12. And one of the things that three of these schools will be able to do, of the new schools, I think one of their recruiting advantages in the portal, you've talked about it being in Houston, is Houston, Orlando, and Cincinnati will be able to pluck the homesick kids.
Right.
The good players. And that is a bigger factor than you would even realize. Because sometimes you look at that 4-star guy just went back. Well, why is he going back there? And you're like, well, he's 90 miles away. And he had gone, UCF might get a kid from Penn State because he's from Orlando.
Yeah.
And then realizes that when it drifts below 60 degrees, it's a frozen hellscape for him. Or, the kid from Houston might go to Texas and they're just stacked at his position, and he can go back home and start at tight end at Houston tomorrow, as opposed to, well, I'm the third guy here. I feel pretty good. I mean, it's a good situation, but there's Jatavian Sanders, and then there's this other, gigantic freak that they found, those things. Well, I'm just going to go to Houston because I'm going to be back home. That's better for me. They're going to have an advantage, I think, built in that like a Baylor wouldn't necessarily have, right? Because they're not, this is not a big area. TCU maybe a little bit, but
that's where I was going to go, because I think having
SMU might have it in the
SMU
ACC.
is definitely going to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And I think I'm glad you brought up TCU, because that's where I wanted to go, because I feel like TCU is exactly in that same boat. Well, I would say they're pretty much exactly being in the Metroplex.
Look, they did that this year, right?
Yes.
They did that with their roster. It's not working out how they thought, but
that's what I wanted to see. You got to have the right staff, and I think that when we get when we look at programs like a Colorado who have gone out and had this max exodus, this roster turnover, and they're having some of the success, I think you've got to have the right pieces in place too, and you can't just expect, like TCU was trying to do when they brought in all the transfers, like everything's just not going to miss a beat and we're going to have the seamless transition from last year into this season. They're not. I think it takes the right coaching staff and the right people as well to kind of build the relationships with those kids, because it's just because you live there and you get the talent back, it's not going to work. You got to put the work in as well. So that's what I'm saying. Like, Dana might be in the position where he can grab those Houston kids, but if we're 2 years into this and his personality and stuff just isn't meshing well and they're not able to take advantage of it, you gotta do something.
Yeah, and I'll still go that Dana's in that group of coaches that may just say, this is harder. It's even harder now, and I'm just not on board. Like, I don't want to keep chasing this. I just want to coach ball. Like, there's too much negotiation now, and recruiting is hard enough.
Oh,
man.
Yeah,
it is hard.